Sergeant Emily Carter arrived at Fort Benning under the soft haze of dawn. The morning air was sharp with humidity and the scent of freshly turned earth. She stepped onto the parade ground, her boots clicking against the concrete, echoing in the quiet before the other recruits arrived. A small, slight figure in the midst of towering, muscular men, she drew the gaze of those around her. Whispers traveled through the ranks like wind through tall grass. Who does she think she is? Looks like a tourist. Emily ignored them, adjusting her duffel bag and focusing on the weight of the rifle case in her hands. She had known this would happen. From the moment she enlisted, Emily understood that she would be underestimated. Her family had always called her stubborn. Her father, a former sheriff in rural Montana, had drilled into her the lessons of patience and precision. As a child, she had spent countless hours on the ranch's edge, shooting tin cans off fence posts, learning the subtle dance between breath, wind, and distance. Those long afternoons, silent except for the thud of bullets and the occasional crow overhead, had taught her a lesson the recruits at Fort Benning had yet to learn. Quiet strength could speak louder than the loudest insults. By the time the other recruits had arrived, the parade ground was alive with energy, a cacophony of laughter, joking, and the rhythmic slap of boots. Emily adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder and made her way toward the armory. She could feel the eyes on her, the weight of skepticism pressing down like a physical presence. A few of the men exchanged knowing glances and smirks, clearly already crafting stories about the new girl who didn't belong. She caught snippets of their muttered conversations. "Bet she won't last a week," one said. "She'll break before sunrise," another chimed in. Emily didn't respond. There was no need. Words carried little power. Only action mattered. She remembered her father's advice. Measure everything twice, shoot once, and never let them see fear in your eyes. Those words were etched into her mind as she entered the armory, greeted by the familiar metallic scent of rifles, gunpowder, and steel. Her hands traced the cold surface of the sniper rifle on the rack, feeling the smooth barrel, the heft of the stock, the precision-engineered trigger. It was comforting. Here she was in control. Here she could prove that skill mattered more than size, that patience mattered more than bravado. Later that morning, the instructors called the recruits for orientation. Emily took her place at the end of the line, careful not to draw attention. She listened intently as Captain Miles, a stern man with sharp eyes and a voice that demanded respect, outlined the grueling weeks ahead. This wasn't boot camp. This was sniper qualification, a test of patience, discipline, and mental endurance. Emily's pulse quickened with anticipation rather than fear. This was her element, the place where she could show what she was capable of. During the first physical assessment, Emily noticed how her peers moved some rushed, others stumbled, all trying to impress. She, on the other hand, focused on her own breathing, her own timing. Every step was deliberate, every motion calculated. When they were told to assemble in formation, the laughter began. A tall recruit leaned toward his friend, pointing at her. "She's tiny," he whispered. "How's she gonna carry that rifle up the hills?" Emily felt a flicker of irritation, but did not react. Instead, she visualized the rifle as an extension of her own arm, imagining the shot, the trajectory, the perfect landing. By midday, she was introduced to her first range drill. The instructors laid out stationary targets at varying distances. The taller recruits struggled with the finer mechanics, adjusting scopes, overcompensating for minor tremors. Emily, in contrast, moved with quiet confidence. She adjusted her scope, settled her breathing, and waited. When she fired, the bullet hit dead center, perfectly aligned with the mark. A few recruits glanced over, eyebrows raised. Some tried to hide their surprise. Others just stared. Whispers passed along the line. "Not bad. For a girl, one muttered, though his tone carried a hint of begrudging respect. Later, as the recruits rested, Emily found a quiet corner near the armory. She opened her duffel and checked her rifle again, methodically cleaning and inspecting each part. She knew that success here would not come from brute force or loud posturing. It would come from patience, precision, and control. Her mind wandered briefly to the ranch in Montana, to the long afternoons under the wide sky, to the quiet lessons her father had taught her. Those lessons were her secret weapon lessons no one here could mock or take away. By evening, the camp settled into the dull routine of inspection and drills. Emily observed her peers as they laughed together, sharing stories and joking at her expense. But the laughter no longer affected her as it once might have. She knew that their underestimation was temporary. The real challenge was not to prove herself to them now, but to master the skill that would one day make them silent. As she lay on her cot that night, staring at the ceiling, she imagined the day she would be the one everyone watched in awe, not ridicule. Before sleep claimed her, Emily whispered to herself, repeating a mantra she had carried since the ranch. "Let's see if they still laugh." The words felt heavy with purpose. Somewhere in the shadows of the base, the echoes of doubt floated, but she let them linger. Tomorrow would not be a day for words. Tomorrow would be for action. And Emily Carter had a plan quiet, deadly, and precise. She closed her eyes, letting the silence of the night sharpen her focus, preparing for a journey that would test not just her body, but her heart and mind. The first day had ended, but the battle for respect, for skill, for proving herself, was only beginning. Outside, the base settled into the dim glow of the setting sun, unaware that among the ranks walked a soldier who would soon leave an indelible mark. Emily's story had begun, quiet and unassuming, yet full of the promise of extraordinary feats. The laughter she endured would one day be silenced forever, and she would emerge not just as a soldier, but as a force to be reckoned with. The sun rose over the training fields at Fort Benning, casting long shadows across the dusty terrain. Emily Carter approached the sniper qualification range, her rifle case clutched in her hands. Today was the beginning of what the instructors called the real test, a week that would separate the exceptional from the mediocre. The dozen other recruits, all men, were already there, joking loudly, flexing their muscles, and casting mocking glances at her. "She's going to slow us down," muttered one recruit, adjusting his scope with exaggerated care. Another snickered. "I hope they brought her a chair. She might need it for the climb." Emily ignored them, letting the laughter roll off her like water on steel. She knew this was part of the ritual, the first barrier of respect. Make them doubt you, let them underestimate you, and then show them what discipline could do. The first drill was simple on paper, a series of static targets at varying distances. On the surface, anyone could handle it. In reality, this was a lesson in patience, wind calculation, and focus under pressure. Emily knelt, adjusted her scope, and began her assessment. Her movements were deliberate, fluid, almost imperceptible. She studied the wind, felt the vibrations in the earth, and listened to the subtle sounds around her. She pulled the trigger, and the bullet hit dead center. A ripple of surprise passed through the line. A tall, broad-shouldered recruit smirked, whispering, "Beginner's luck." Emily didn't respond. She knew luck had nothing to do with it. Her aim came from years of practice, patience, and a mental discipline honed from quiet afternoons on her father's Montana ranch. She had learned to anticipate movement, to respect distance, and to trust instinct over bravado. The next exercise tested mobility and endurance. Recruits were instructed to traverse uneven terrain, set up a firing position, and engage moving targets. Emily's peers charged forward, heavy boots thudding, muscles tensing, voices laughing and shouting at one another. She moved differently, slow, careful, conserving energy, keeping her breathing steady. When she finally reached her assigned spot, she had not only completed the run without error, but was in perfect position to take her shots. Laughter erupted again when her targets popped up. One recruit leaned over, grinning. "Watch this, she'll probably miss all of them." Emily settled into her prone position, adjusting her scope once more. The wind shifted subtly. She waited. Breath held, finger on the trigger, she lined up her first shot. Bang. Dead center. Another. Bang. Dead center. By the end of the drill, her score was flawless. Silence fell over the group. Even the mocking glances carried a new weight, a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. During the lunch break, Emily stayed quiet. She unrolled a small blanket, took out a notebook, and began writing notes, wind patterns, distances, her own observations about the terrain. The others gathered in small clusters, joking about her miracle shots and whispering about how she might have cheated somehow. One recruit leaned closer to his friend. "She's too precise. Something's off." Emily simply tightened her boots and focused on her notebook, unbothered. Private Daniel Ruiz, a quiet young man with dark hair and a nervous smile, approached her cautiously. "Hey," he whispered. "Don't mind them. They're scared of you. That's why they laugh." Emily looked up, offering a brief nod of acknowledgement. She appreciated the support, but didn't need reassurance. Her plan was simple. Let her skill do the talking. Let patience silence the noise, and wait for the moment when it mattered most. The afternoon brought the hardest test yet, the moving target course. Instructors had set up a simulation that mimicked real combat conditions, targets popping up randomly, varying distances, and unpredictable wind shifts. Emily watched as her peers floundered, rushing shots, adjusting scopes in panic, letting frustration control them. One by one, the targets fell before her in neat precision. Every shot calculated, every movement controlled. Captain Miles observed silently, arms crossed, his eyes sharp. He had seen many recruits fail at this stage, but something about Emily made him pause. By the evening, Emily's prowess was undeniable. The laughter had faded, replaced by quiet murmurs. Her peers still avoided acknowledging her directly, but their respect began to show in subtle ways. A hesitant nod, a moment of silence when she moved past them, a lowered voice when her skill was discussed. Yet Emily remained cautious. She had learned early that recognition could be fleeting, that the real test would come not in drills or simulations, but in moments where life and death hung in balance. Later that night, the range was quiet, illuminated only by the dim glow of distant floodlights. Emily remained behind, practicing alone. She adjusted her scope repeatedly, measured the effect of wind on a single shot, and rehearsed her breathing techniques. Every click, every adjustment, was part of a ritual, a silent promise to herself. She would not be the recruit who faltered, nor the soldier who failed. The rifle was her extension, the field her classroom, and patience her weapon. As she finished, she stood, surveying the range. The targets lay as she had left them, each shot perfect, each measurement precise. She thought of the whispers and laughter from earlier, felt the sting of doubt they had tried to plant. But she let it go. Every insult, every smirk, every doubt was fuel for the fire she had been carrying her entire life. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of her rifle in her hands, and whispered the same words she had said on her first day. "Let's see if they still laugh." Her thoughts drifted to home, the wide skies of Montana, the ranch, the long afternoons spent with her father. She remembered his voice, calm but firm. Skill is quiet. Show it in silence. The loudest voices rarely hit the mark. That lesson, ingrained in her from childhood, was her secret advantage. While others relied on muscle, noise, and ego, she relied on focus, discipline, and a calm mind. She had seen it work with her own eyes on the prairie, and she knew it would work here as well. By the end of the day, the other recruits left the range, exhausted and murmuring among themselves. Emily stayed a little longer, checking her rifle, reviewing her notes, rehearsing scenarios in her mind. She understood that the mockery, the disbelief, and the underestimation were all temporary. Respect had to be earned, and she had already begun earning it in the quiet moments, in the invisible victories. As night fell, she returned to her barracks, her steps measured, her mind focused. The journey ahead was long and grueling, filled with obstacles, ridicule, and tests that would push her beyond the limits of endurance. But Emily Carter was no ordinary recruit. She was patient, precise, and relentless. And in the days ahead, when the laughter faded and only the truth remained, she would show everyone that skill and determination could silence even the loudest doubters. For now, she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. Tomorrow would bring new drills, new challenges, and new laughter, but Emily was ready. She had already begun turning doubt into fuel, mockery into motivation. And when the time came, when the moment demanded more than drills or simulations, she would rise. She would be the soldier they never expected. And when she did, no one would dare laugh again. The early morning sun cast a golden haze over the sniper range at Fort Benning. Mist clung to the grass, shimmering like fine dust as it caught the first light. Emily Carter approached the course with a quiet confidence, her rifle case in hand. Today was the culmination of weeks of grueling training, ridicule, and silent determination, the final sniper test. Every movement mattered, every breath measured. 12 targets awaited, positioned at varying distances across uneven terrain, each one designed to challenge the recruit's focus, patience, and accuracy. Emily's peers were tense, nervously adjusting scopes, murmuring calculations aloud, and exchanging nervous jokes to hide their fear. Many had underestimated her throughout training, laughing at her quiet demeanor, mocking her small frame, and whispering that she would fail under pressure. Now, however, those smirks were replaced with uncertainty. Captain Miles, overseeing the test, walked along the ridgeline, clipboard in hand. His eyes were sharp, scanning each recruit with practiced detachment. Emily felt his gaze, but it did not intimidate her. She welcomed it. She had learned to perform under observation, to let focus override ego, and to let skill speak louder than words. She knelt, adjusting her rifle carefully, and took in the wind, the subtle bends in the grass, the distant shimmer of heat rising off the targets. The first target appeared, a small silhouette in the distance. Emily's breathing slowed. She counted to 3 in her mind, letting each heartbeat sync with the subtle vibrations of the rifle against her shoulder. She exhaled, and the shot rang out. Dead center. A hushed murmur spread through the range. The second target popped up moments later. Emily adjusted for the minor shift in wind, breathing calmly, measuring distance, and squeezing the trigger. Another perfect hit. Her peers faltered, some rushing, others shaking with tension. One recruit cursed under his breath, hitting the side of his target by inches, glaring at her out of disbelief. Emily ignored them, keeping her mind focused entirely on the rhythm of the course. As the targets continued to appear, the challenges increased. Some moved erratically. Others were set behind uneven terrain, requiring Emily to calculate trajectory and compensate for environmental factors. Her body remained still, every muscle controlled, every motion purposeful. Her eyes scanned, measured, and predicted the subtle patterns in the target's movement. She became one with the rifle, the scope an extension of her vision, her mind a calm calculation machine. Captain Miles watched silently. Many recruits had failed at this stage, allowing nerves, impatience, or overconfidence to cloud judgment. Emily's composure was striking. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. Each shot was deliberate, precise, and confident. With each hit, the whispers and skeptical glances from her peers began to die away, replaced by astonishment. The mocking laughter from earlier in the week had vanished entirely. The final challenge was the most difficult. A single target placed 1,000 yards away, across uneven terrain and shifting wind. Captain Miles's voice, normally sharp and commanding, softened slightly. This is the ultimate test. One shot, one chance. Emily's heart rate remained steady. There was no fear, only focus. She adjusted her position, factoring in wind, distance, and even the subtle shift in her own breathing. Time seemed to slow. She exhaled slowly, aligning the crosshairs with the target, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. The world narrowed to a single point. With perfect timing, she squeezed. The bullet sailed through the air, seeming to hang for a moment before striking the target dead center. Silence fell over the range, so complete it was almost deafening. Even Captain Miles did not immediately speak, his sharp eyes reflecting surprise and perhaps admiration. The other recruits stared in disbelief. Some shook their heads, unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. The whispers of doubt and mockery from days past were gone, replaced by an unspoken acknowledgement. Emily Carter had mastered what few could. She had not relied on strength or ego, only on discipline, observation, and patience, the very qualities that set her apart. Later that day, the debriefing confirmed what the instructors had already realized. Emily had achieved perfect marks on every stage of the test. Her precision, calm under pressure, and ability to adapt to changing conditions were unmatched. Captain Miles handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was the news of her deployment to a classified overseas operation. Operation Iron Haven. The mission would take her far from the familiar range of Fort Benning into a hostile, unpredictable environment where skill alone could determine life or death. Emily packed her gear quietly that evening, her movements deliberate. She did not boast or seek attention. She had learned that recognition was fleeting and often meaningless. What mattered was preparation, focus, and the ability to act decisively when it counted most. She ran through mental simulations of the upcoming mission, anticipating challenges, planning contingencies, and visualizing every possible scenario. Every calculation, every adjustment, every decision had to be precise. Her bunkmate approached hesitantly. "Emily, that shot. The last one. Nobody's ever done that before. How did you stay so calm?" Emily smiled faintly, not with arrogance, but with quiet understanding. "I've been practicing longer than anyone knows," she said softly. "Patience, observation, and trusting yourself. That's all it takes." The night before her departure, Emily sat alone on the edge of the barracks roof, staring out over the base. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light across the training fields where she had earned her place. She remembered the laughter, the mocking, the doubt. It had all shaped her, forged her into someone capable of extraordinary focus. She allowed herself a single thought. Tomorrow, the challenge would be greater, and the stakes much higher. She would not just be tested on skill, but on survival itself. As she lay down to sleep, Emily's mind was alive with possibilities. She envisioned the mountains she would climb, the positions she would occupy, the movements she would make in silence. She reviewed every calculation, every shot, every lesson she had learned. The rifle lay ready beside her, a trusted companion and extension of her intent. The doubts of the past week had no power here. They were irrelevant. What mattered was what came next: the mission, the challenge, the test that would push her beyond anything she had faced before. By dawn, Emily was ready. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her gear packed meticulously, her rifle checked repeatedly. She did not need anyone's approval. She did not seek recognition. She had proven to herself that patience, discipline, and precision could overcome doubt, mockery, and underestimation. Operation Iron Haven awaited, and she would meet it head-on, armed not just with a rifle, but with every lesson she had learned, every hour of practice, and every ounce of quiet determination. As she boarded the transport plane, leaving Fort Benning behind, Emily felt a mixture of anticipation and calm. The laughter of her peers, the whispers of doubt, the skepticism of instructors all were now memories, distant echoes in the background. She had emerged from the mockery as something more than a recruit. She was a soldier, precise, disciplined, and deadly in focus. And soon, the world beyond the base would see it too. The test of silence had ended, but the real challenge, the one that would test not only skill, but courage, judgment, and resilience, was about to begin. Emily Carter was ready, and in the quiet of her mind, she whispered once more, "Let's see if they still laugh." The sun had barely risen over the jagged peaks of the Afghan mountains when Emily Carter stepped off the transport helicopter. Dust swirled violently around her boots, carried by an unforgiving wind that stung the skin and left grit in the eyes. The heat was sharp, the air thin, and the terrain harsh, a far cry from the controlled environment of Fort Benning. She carried her sniper rifle tightly, the weight of the weapon a familiar comfort amid the chaos. This was no training ground. Here, every shadow could conceal danger, and every ridge could be the last mistake a soldier ever made. Her unit, a small reconnaissance team of elite operators, assembled quickly. Faces were hardened, etched with experience and wary from months of deployment. Emily, though quiet and composed, felt the tension immediately. She had expected skepticism, but in this environment, doubt was deadly. She followed silently as her squad navigated the rough terrain, climbing over loose rocks, avoiding dry brush that could give away their position. The local villagers had called these peaks the Mountains of Eyes, and Emily understood why. Every crag and ridge seemed to conceal invisible threats. The men in her unit still cast glances toward her, measuring her resolve and doubting her readiness. She knew some were waiting for a mistake, some for hesitation, and some just could not reconcile her quiet demeanor with the lethal potential of a sniper. Yet Emily paid them no mind. In the back of her head, she rehearsed the lessons from Fort Benning: patience, calculation, and discipline. Her rifle was her instrument, and in these mountains, it would be her voice. During the first day of reconnaissance, Emily climbed higher than anyone else. She found a natural overlook, a vantage point that allowed her to observe movement across the valleys below. The terrain was merciless sharp stones, loose dirt, and sudden drops that demanded both caution and confidence. She set up her sniper position carefully, testing the stability of the ledge and the line of sight. Here, unlike Fort Benning, mistakes would not be measured in points lost on a test. They could be fatal. Night fell quickly, and with it came the cold. Emily adjusted her sleeping gear, but sleep was secondary to vigilance. Beside her, Leah Price, the medic of the unit and the only other woman present, approached. Leah's presence was quiet and steady, an anchor amid the desolation. She offered Emily a small packet of food and a nod of understanding. "It's not just about skill here," Leah whispered. "It's about patience, reading the land, and knowing when to move and when to wait. Don't let the shadows unsettle you." Emily nodded, appreciating the rare camaraderie in this environment. Over the next days, Emily's unit conducted patrols and surveillance, mapping potential threats and assessing enemy movement. Her teammates remained cautious, their eyes flicking toward her as if expecting hesitation. She observed silently, making notes in her mind, calculating angles, wind patterns, and cover for every possible engagement. Each observation strengthened her confidence. She was no longer the recruit they laughed at. She was the eyes in the mountains, the patient force waiting for the precise moment to act. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, the radio crackled to life. Movement detected 12 hostiles approaching ridgeline. Emily felt her pulse steady, her focus sharpening. The squad tensed. The men whispered frantic strategies and positions. Emily did not move hastily. She climbed carefully to a higher ridge, using her rifle case as support, each motion deliberate, silent, and controlled. Her peers watched, some with skepticism, some with an unspoken hope that she could perform as training suggested. The ridgeline offered a perfect vantage. Emily knelt, adjusted her scope, and scanned the approaching figures. She calculated distance, wind, and trajectory, as she had countless times during training. Yet, unlike the controlled environment of Fort Benning, these targets were real, human, and dangerous. Every mistake could be lethal. Still, she was calm, a stark contrast to the fear and tension around her. This was the moment her training had prepared her for, the bridge between preparation and action. As the hostiles advanced, one of her squad mates muttered in disbelief. "She's gonna," but the words died in the wind. Emily's finger rested lightly on the trigger, her breathing synchronized with the rifle's weight and the rhythm of the valley. She waited for the perfect alignment, adjusting for the subtle sway of heat and dust in the air. In that silence, Emily became invisible, a shadow herself, her presence only known to the rifle she wielded. She fired her first shot. The enemy staggered, confusion spreading as the first figure fell. Then another, and another. The rhythm of precision was relentless, calm, controlled. Each movement she had rehearsed in Fort Benning now played out in deadly reality. Within moments, the 12 hostiles were down, each strike measured, silent, and precise. The squad stared, awe replacing doubt. The mocking laughter that had haunted her through training was gone. Respect had arrived, as sudden and absolute as her skill. In the aftermath, Emily's squad processed the reality of the engagement. No one spoke at first. The wind carried away the echoes of the fallen. Leah came forward, her eyes meeting Emily's with understanding and quiet admiration. "You did it," she said simply. Emily's face betrayed no triumph, only focus and awareness. Each life taken weighed on her, even as the necessity of action justified the outcome. Skill alone was not enough. Moral clarity and self-control were essential. That night, Emily climbed to a high overlook, gazing across the mountains under a sky splashed with stars. The terrain stretched endlessly, shadows hiding dangers unseen. She felt a mixture of pride, responsibility, and haunting awareness of the fragility of life. The mountains had tested her patience, focus, and resolve, but the real trials were yet to come. She would need every ounce of discipline she had cultivated in training, and then more. As Emily settled into her sleeping gear, she reflected on the weeks at Fort Benning. Every insult, every doubt, every moment of laughter had shaped her. They had underestimated her patience, her skill, and her resolve. Here, in the desert of shadows, she was no longer the outsider. She was the observer, the sniper, the force that made the mountains tremble. Her thoughts drifted back to home, to Montana's wide skies, the ranch, and the countless afternoons spent learning to wait, to calculate, to act only when the moment demanded perfection. Those lessons had carried her here, through ridicule and doubt, to the very edge of life and death. And in the quiet of the desert night, Emily whispered once again, "Let's see if they still laugh." Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new decisions, and the constant pressure of survival. But Emily Carter, trained in silence and forged by patience, was ready. She was no longer a recruit. She was a soldier, precise, calm, and deadly in focus. The mountains of eyes had revealed her true nature. and the world beyond this ridge would soon see the quiet force that could move unseen, strike decisively, and command respect without a single word. The valley below was alive with chaos. A cacophony of distant gunfire shouted commands, and the muted thud of incoming rounds striking the earth. Emily Carter remained motionless atop the ridge, her sniper rifle cradled in her arms like an extension of herself. Her breath was slow, measured, each inhale and exhale in perfect rhythm with the sway of the scope. She scanned the terrain, counting 12 enemy combatants advancing toward the convoy, trapped in the valley below. Panic rippled through her squad, their voices clipped with fear and urgency, but Emily's mind was calm. This was her moment, the culmination of years of training, patience, and relentless preparation. The soldiers around her were tense, shifting nervously, some whispering doubts aloud. "She's going up there? Seriously?" One muttered. Laughter bubbled from another, though it carried an edge of disbelief rather than humor. Emily had heard this tone countless times before mockery mixed with incredulity, but she did not react. She had learned long ago that skill, not words, silenced critics. Every movement she had made, every calculation she had rehearsed in Fort Benning, and every long night spent perfecting her aim had led to this exact second. The wind whipped across the ridge, carrying dust and loose stones, but Emily adjusted with ease. She calculated distance, elevation, and wind direction in her mind with a precision that had become second nature. She lay prone, her rifle steadied against a rock, and let her gaze sweep the battlefield below. The convoy was pinned, the drivers frozen behind overturned vehicles, and the enemy was closing in. Her squad looked to her with a mixture of awe and doubt. Emily's lips parted slightly as she whispered, almost to herself, 12 seconds. 12 targets. 1 shot each. Then she fired. The first enemy went down silently, collapsing behind a boulder. A split second later, another fell, and then another, each shot deliberate, precise, and devastating. The rhythm was hypnotic. Inhale, align, exhale, fire. Within seconds, 12 figures staggered and fell, as if the valley itself had claimed them. The chaos below froze. The convoy crew stared in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The mocking laughter of her peers vanished, replaced by disbelief and awe. Emily remained calm, her face serene as she surveyed the ridge and the valley. The weight of each shot, each life ended, pressed on her conscience, but there was no time for hesitation. Leah Price, watching from a lower ledge, finally allowed herself a whispered exhale of relief. "You did it," she said softly, but Emily's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. She had not acted for praise or recognition. She had acted because the mission demanded precision and control. Captain Miles's voice crackled over the radio, steady yet tinged with disbelief. "Target zone clear." "Emily, who the hell was that?" Her squad mates exchanged glances, eyes wide, some shaking their heads, as if to shake off the impossibility of what they had witnessed. The mountain winds carried the sound away, but the impression remained. Emily Carter was no longer the underestimated recruit. She had transformed, in an instant, into the eyes and force of the unit, calm and lethal. The convoy moved cautiously, securing the area, while Emily remained atop the ridge, scanning for any remaining threats. Her rifle felt heavier now, as if each bullet had added weight to her arms, yet her movements were fluid and controlled. She checked the scope, adjusted the bipod, and reviewed the landscape, ensuring no enemy remained hidden in the folds of the mountains. Every lesson learned at Fort Benning, the patience, the breath control, the anticipation, had manifested flawlessly in this real, dangerous environment. Once the valley was secure, Emily descended to join her squad. Their expressions were unreadable at first, oscillating between awe and a subtle, hesitant respect. One of the more skeptical soldiers finally spoke, voice tight with disbelief. I didn't think you could do that." Emily simply nodded, her eyes calm. Words were unnecessary. Actions had spoken louder than any statement, louder than any protest or laughter that had plagued her during training. She had earned their recognition through precision, discipline, and courage. Later, as the squad regrouped and tended to minor injuries, Emily remained quiet, her mind still processing the rapid series of events. The valley, now silent, was a stark reminder of the deadly efficiency required in warfare. She had executed each shot with skill, but she understood the weight of her actions. 12 lives had ended under her hand, and she bore that responsibility fully. No medal, no praise, no acknowledgement could absolve the seriousness of that truth. Leah came to her side, her voice soft but firm. "It's not easy," she said. "You did what had to be done, but it's okay to feel it." Emily's lips curved slightly in acknowledgement. She had been trained to act, but she had also been trained to reflect, to respect the gravity of her role. She was not a machine. She was a soldier, precise, controlled, and human. That balance between lethal skill and moral clarity defined her. Night fell, and Emily climbed a high ridge to survey the valley once more. The moon cast silver light across the terrain, illuminating the contours of the mountains and the scattered remnants of the conflict below. She felt a quiet connection to the land, understanding its rhythms, its hazards, and the unseen dangers that still lurked. Her rifle lay across her lap, her fingers lightly tracing the trigger, not for use but for reassurance. This was her domain, and in it, patience and focus were as lethal as the weapons she wielded. For hours she remained there, silent, reflecting on the mission. The laughter from Fort Benning seemed distant now, replaced by the sobering reality of life and death. She had been tested, and she had risen to the challenge. Yet she knew the journey was far from over. Every action in this environment carried consequences, and the next engagement could demand even greater precision, courage, and judgment. Emily's thoughts returned to her training, the countless hours of preparation, the mockery and doubt she had endured. It had all been necessary. Each insult, each sneer, each underestimation had forged her resolve, honed her focus, and prepared her for this moment. She whispered once more, softly, almost to the mountains themselves. They laughed once. Now they watch. As she descended the ridge to rejoin her squad, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer the recruit at Fort Benning, doubted and underestimated. She was the soldier in the mountains of eyes, calm, precise, and lethal in execution. Her mission had been accomplished with mastery and grace, yet the moral weight of her actions reminded her of the gravity of her responsibility. She would carry it with her, silently, as a constant reminder that precision, patience, and focus could save lives even if it required taking others. The squad settled for the night, the faint murmur of distant fires and the rustle of the wind the only sounds in the vast desert. Emily checked her rifle one last time, ensuring it was clean, ready, and secure. Her mind remained sharp, her body alert. Sleep would come, but it would be measured, controlled, as part of her preparation for the next day. The battlefield had tested her skill. Tomorrow would test her resolve, endurance, and humanity. In the quiet of the desert night, Emily Carter understood her place. She was no longer simply a soldier in training. She was a force capable of decisive, calculated action. And though the world around her remained chaotic and dangerous, she had proven one undeniable truth. Those who laughed at her before would never doubt her again. Her presence in the mountains of eyes was silent, unassuming, yet lethal. And in the unfolding conflict, that combination of precision, patience, and calm would define not only her success, but the survival of those around her. The aftermath of the valley engagement lingered like a heavy fog over the mountains. Emily Carter descended the ridge alongside her squad, the moonlight glinting off her rifle's polished metal. The battlefield below was silent now, the echoes of gunfire replaced by the whispers of wind through jagged rocks and dry brush. The convoy was secure, and the surviving soldiers moved cautiously, checking for remaining threats. The 12 hostiles had been neutralized, each shot precise, controlled, and deliberate, but the weight of those lives pressed on Emily's mind like stone. Her squad moved in tense silence. The soldiers who had doubted her in the first hours of deployment now regarded her differently. Captain Miles's expression was unreadable, but his eyes carried a flicker of acknowledgement, a subtle nod to the precision and calm that had saved the convoy. Emily's peers, previously skeptical, had shifted from disbelief to awe. A quiet respect formed, not from words, but from the undeniable truth of her skill. Her actions spoke louder than any speech could. Leah Price walked beside her, adjusting bandages on a fellow soldier and offering quiet reassurance. She caught Emily's eye, a soft smile crossing her face. "You kept everyone alive," Leah whispered. "It wasn't just skill. It was presence, focus, calm. They followed you because they had to." Emily nodded faintly, acknowledging the compliment, but feeling no triumph. She understood the reality of war. Success was never absolute, and survival carried consequences that could not be ignored. As the team regrouped at the temporary command post, Emily observed quietly. Medics tended minor injuries, radios crackled with reports, and soldiers moved with a mix of adrenaline and exhaustion. No one approached her immediately. She did not seek recognition. She did not crave praise. Yet slowly, acknowledgement arrived in subtle ways. A nod from a squadmate. A careful glance of respect from a superior. Even Captain Miles, usually reserved and stern, approached her privately. "Emily," he began, voice low, "I've seen many soldiers handle pressure, but few with the precision and composure you've displayed today. You saved lives." Emily's expression remained neutral, but internally she absorbed the weight of his words. They were not empty praise. They were recognition grounded in fact. She had performed flawlessly in circumstances far more dangerous than any training simulation, and the respect of her unit had shifted from hesitant skepticism to quiet admiration. Despite the acknowledgement, Emily felt the burden of her actions acutely. She walked to the edge of the camp, staring out over the valley below. The terrain, scarred by the day's violence, stretched endlessly, and the weight of responsibility pressed down. 12 lives had been taken, and though they were enemy combatants, she understood the gravity of the act. War was not a game. Each decision carried consequences, and Emily had learned to carry those consequences silently, without complaint or display. During the evening briefing, the unit discussed strategy for upcoming missions. Emily listened carefully, offering measured input when appropriate, her voice calm and precise. She had earned her place not through words, but through action. The soldiers now followed her lead when it mattered, trusting her judgment, respecting her focus. The dynamic within the squad had shifted. Where once there had been doubt, there was now reliance, a fragile yet powerful trust. Later, as the night deepened, Emily retreated to a quiet corner of the base. She removed her gloves and gently cleaned her rifle, methodically inspecting every component. The mechanical precision of the rifle mirrored her own discipline, a ritual that grounded her in the midst of chaos. Her mind replayed each shot from the engagement, analyzing angles, wind adjustments, and timing. Even in the success, she sought improvement, a reminder that perfection was a pursuit, not a destination. Leah approached quietly, carrying a small cup of water. "You have to rest," she said gently. "You can't carry this alone all the time." Emily accepted the water, but shook her head. "It's not about rest. "It's about being ready," she replied. "The valley is quiet now, but the mountains aren't done testing us. Every engagement could be the last. I need to be ready." Leah studied her silently, recognizing the unwavering discipline and resolve that defined Emily Carter. Throughout the night, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The ridicule and doubt from Fort Benning, the long nights of solitary training, the whispered skepticism of peers, all had forged her into a soldier capable of decisive action under extreme pressure. She realized that every challenge, every insult, had been a stepping stone toward this moment. She had been underestimated for years, but in this desolate, dangerous environment, her skill had earned her respect without words, without arrogance, only through action. By dawn, the unit moved again, preparing for reconnaissance patrols across the rugged terrain. Emily adjusted her rifle, tested her scope, and checked her position. Her peers now looked to her for guidance in spotting vantage points, in choosing cover, in reading terrain. The mockery and doubt of earlier days had been replaced by trust, a fragile earned acknowledgement of her ability to survive and command the battlefield silently. Yet Emily remained vigilant. She understood that respect was earned continuously, and that every decision carried weight. The mountains were full of unseen dangers, and the enemy was unpredictable. Skill alone would not ensure survival. Patience, judgment, and morality were equally vital. Emily's quiet reflection on the human cost of action shaped her resolve, reminding her that precision was not just about hitting targets, but about understanding the consequences of every engagement. As the squad moved through the morning haze, Emily observed, calculated, and guided. She offered subtle advice on positioning, wind adjustment, and observation techniques. Slowly, her team adapted to her rhythm, learning to trust her calm focus and measured approach. The trust that had once been absent now became a vital component of survival, reinforcing Emily's quiet authority in the mountains. By evening, after a day of scouting and minor engagements, Emily returned to her post overlooking the valley. The wind carried distant sounds of movement, and she adjusted her scope, scanning for threats. She reflected on the events of the previous day, recognizing the transformation within herself and her unit. The soldiers who had once doubted her now depended on her judgment, following her lead silently. Respect, hard-earned, was written in every glance, every nod, every decision they deferred to her expertise. Alone under the fading light, Emily whispered softly, almost to the mountains themselves. They didn't laugh this time. They listened. The words were not boastful. They were acknowledgement of the silent victory that came from discipline, patience, and skill. She understood that respect was fragile, and the mountains demanded vigilance, but for the first time, she allowed herself a quiet moment of recognition for what she had accomplished. That night, Emily slept lightly, her rifle within reach, her mind alert. She carried the lessons of both training and combat, the weight of responsibility, and the awareness of moral consequence. She knew the journey ahead would test her further missions, with greater risk, enemies more cunning, and moments requiring split-second judgment. Yet she also knew she had earned her place, not through noise or bravado, but through precise, measured action that commanded respect in a language all soldiers understood. In the desert of shadows, Emily Carter had proven herself. The mocking laughter of the past had been replaced by quiet acknowledgement, trust, and reliance. She had not sought recognition, but it had arrived, written in smoke and silence, in the unwavering gaze of her squadmates and the subtle approval of her commanding officer. She had become more than a soldier. She had become a force defined by patience, discipline, and the quiet confidence of mastery. The morning sun barely pierced the haze of dust and smoke that clung to the Afghan valley. Emily Carter crouched atop a jagged ridge, her rifle steady in her hands, eyes scanning the distant horizon. This was no routine patrol. Intelligence had reported enemy snipers operating in the area, laying traps and waiting to ambush any movement. Emily's squad moved cautiously below, each step calculated, boots crunching on the rocky terrain. Every shadow, every rock, could conceal a lethal adversary. Her unit had learned to trust her judgment after the engagement with the convoy, and today, that trust would be tested. Captain Miles signaled a halt, his eyes narrowing as he observed the terrain. "We've got a sniper nest ahead," he said quietly. "Emily, we need eyes on them before we move." She nodded, silently taking her position on a higher ridge that offered both cover and a perfect vantage point. Her heartbeat was steady, every muscle in her body relaxed yet poised. This was her domain, where patience and precision mattered more than speed or bravado. Below, her squad spread out, carefully scanning for movement. Emily adjusted her scope, factoring in the wind, elevation, and terrain, just as she had countless times in training and combat. The enemy snipers were professionals, and their skills rivaled her own. One miscalculation could result in casualties or worse. She reminded herself to breathe, to focus, to let instinct guide her. Every second counted, every decision was critical. She spotted them first, a pair of enemy snipers, hidden in natural crevices, camouflaged against the rocks. They were skilled, their eyes constantly shifting, scanning for any sign of exposure. Emily tracked their subtle movements, calculating angles and potential lines of sight. She knew that a single wrong move by her squad could trigger an ambush. Communication was key, but so was stealth. She gestured to her squad, signaling the position of the snipers. Captain Miles acknowledged the signal, whispering instructions. "We'll approach from the left. Emily, you cover our movement. Keep your shots ready, but only take them when absolutely necessary." Emily's focus sharpened. This was not a matter of pride. It was survival. She positioned herself to cover the ridge, her rifle aligned perfectly, scope trained on the enemy snipers. Time slowed, each breath deliberate, each heartbeat measured. The squad moved cautiously, keeping low and using cover. Emily observed silently, tracking the enemy's patterns, anticipating their reactions. Minutes felt like hours. A sudden movement, a shadow shifting behind a rock, alerted her. She adjusted her scope, held her breath, and fired. The first sniper fell, collapsing silently behind the boulder. Her shot was perfect, precise, and decisive. The second sniper reacted instantly, returning fire, the crack of the rifle echoing across the valley. Emily rolled behind cover, tracking the movement. She recalculated angles, factoring in the slope of the ridge and the wind currents. Her next shot flew true, striking the target without hesitation. Her squad below pressed forward, guided by her observations, taking advantage of the temporary lull. Suddenly, an explosion erupted near the squad's rear. A trap had been triggered. Another group of enemy combatants had been lying in wait. Chaos threatened to erupt. Emily remained calm, her mind a quiet machine of calculations. She signaled her squad to scatter and find cover, while she kept her scope trained on the advancing enemy. Her fingers squeezed the trigger, each shot measured, stopping threats before they could approach her team. Minutes stretched, each second critical. Emily's training, patience, and discipline were being tested to the extreme. She adjusted for every environmental factor, every shifting shadow, every subtle motion of her enemies. Her body was tense, but controlled, her mind focused entirely on the mission. Around her, the squad executed her guidance flawlessly, moving with a new rhythm, trusting her calculations, and adapting to the threats with precision. The final enemy sniper emerged from a narrow crevice, a master of camouflage and concealment. Emily's pulse remained steady, her mind racing through every tactical possibility. She adjusted her scope, factoring in the distance and elevation, the wind direction, and even the enemy's posture. Her breath slowed, her body locked in perfect control. The shot required absolute precision. One miscalculation could cost lives. She exhaled slowly, aligned the crosshairs with the target, and fired. The enemy sniper staggered, fell, and the ridge was clear. Emily's squad let out a collective exhale, the tension finally releasing. Captain Miles approached, eyes sharp but betraying a hint of respect. "That was flawless," he said. "I've never seen precision like that under this kind of pressure." Emily merely nodded, her face calm, betraying none of the adrenaline that had surged through her in the last tense minutes. As the squad regrouped, Emily scanned the valley one last time. The mountains were silent again, the echoes of gunfire and explosions carried away by the wind. She allowed herself a brief reflection. This was her domain, the culmination of years of training, discipline, and patience. Every shot, every decision had been calculated, and the lives saved, both of her squad and the convoy earlier, had proven her worth. Yet Emily knew the cost of mastery in combat. The weight of every action pressed on her conscience. She had executed deadly precision, but the consequences of life and death were never abstract. They were immediate, personal, and permanent. She understood the duality of her role, the necessity of lethal skill, and the moral responsibility that accompanied it. Night fell once again over the mountains, and Emily remained vigilant. She cleaned her rifle meticulously, every action deliberate, her mind replaying the day's events. The squad now regarded her not with skepticism, but with deep respect and reliance. Her quiet authority had been established not through words, but through decisive, precise action. The mockery and doubt that had followed her since Fort Benning were long gone, replaced by trust and recognition earned in fire and shadow. She climbed to a high overlook, gazing across the valley below. The mountains stretched endlessly, shadows hiding threats unseen. Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Ridicule and doubt, grueling training, relentless preparation, and finally, the crucible of combat. She whispered to herself softly, "They watched. And now they follow." Emily Carter had become more than a soldier. She had become a sentinel, a force defined by patience, precision, and moral clarity. The enemy would test her again. The mountains would shift, and the dangers would grow more cunning. Yet she was ready. Her skill was proven, her focus unshakable, and her discipline absolute. She had faced the deadliest challenge yet, and emerged not just alive, but victorious, respected, and formidable. The shadows of the hunter had fallen, but Emily remained the silent force within them, calm, precise, and deadly. And in the quiet of the desert night, she allowed herself a rare thought: they will never laugh again. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged mountains, painting the peaks in gold and crimson. Emily Carter sat atop her perch, rifle across her lap, scanning the valley below. The desert air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dust and distant pine. For weeks, she had been in constant motion training, observing, fighting, and surviving. The valley that had once been a chaotic battlefield now lay silent, almost serene, yet Emily knew the peace was fragile. Danger could erupt in a heartbeat, and vigilance was the only currency of survival. Her squad stirred below, moving with newfound confidence and precision. The soldiers had been tested alongside her, and each engagement had forged trust that replaced the doubt once aimed at her quiet demeanor. Captain Miles, standing nearby, watched Emily with an unreadable expression, one that hinted at deep respect. Emily's presence had shifted the dynamics of the unit. She had become not only a sniper, but a silent leader, her actions and decisions carrying weight without the need for spoken command. The morning briefing was concise. Intelligence reported scattered enemy activity across the northern ridges, but no major offensives. Emily listened, taking in the details, calculating potential vantage points, distances, and cover. She offered guidance sparingly, each word precise and considered. Her squad followed her lead naturally, no longer questioning, no longer doubting. In the weeks of operations, Emily had transformed from the quiet recruit, laughed at during training, into the linchpin of survival for the entire unit. After the briefing, Emily took a moment alone, leaning against a rock, observing the mountains that had become both her challenge and her classroom. Each engagement had tested her skill, patience, and resolve. 12 enemies had fallen in the convoy mission, 12 more neutralized in the sniper ambush. Countless others avoided or defeated through careful planning. She had learned to balance lethal precision with moral awareness, understanding that every shot carried consequence beyond the immediate tactical gain. Her thoughts drifted to home, to Montana, and the wide skies and quiet ranches that had first taught her patience. She remembered her early days at Fort Benning, the ridicule, the laughter, the skepticism of instructors and peers alike. Each moment of doubt had hardened her resolve, sharpened her focus, and prepared her for these mountains. She allowed herself a small, fleeting smile. The laughter that had once sought to diminish her now seemed almost insignificant, replaced by respect written in action and results. The squad moved into position for a reconnaissance patrol, and Emily led from above, covering their movements silently. The terrain was uneven, shadows deep, and the threat of enemy engagement constant. Yet her confidence was unshakable. She had faced real combat, had tested her skill against skilled adversaries, and emerged alive and effective. Every shot she fired, every calculation she made, was deliberate, measured, and precise. She had learned the ultimate lesson of a sniper. Patience was more lethal than haste, observation more powerful than impulse. Suddenly, her scope picked up subtle movement in a distant crevice, a faint glint, almost imperceptible in the rocky terrain. Enemy scouts. Emily's heartbeat remained steady. She adjusted her scope, calculating the trajectory, wind, and distance. She signaled quietly to Captain Miles, who acknowledged and directed the squad's movement accordingly. Emily fired a single, flawless shot. The threat collapsed silently, unseen by the others. Her control, restraint, and precision had once again ensured the squad's survival. The remainder of the day passed without major incident, but Emily remained vigilant. Her mind, honed by countless hours of training and battle, continuously calculated possibilities, scanning for threats, anticipating moves. Her body was relaxed, but alert. She had learned that survival in these mountains depended as much on observation, timing, and judgment as it did on marksmanship. Every engagement had reinforced this truth, and every success had solidified her reputation among her peers. That evening, the unit gathered around a small campfire, sharing stories, rations, and quiet laughter. Emily sat slightly apart, rifle across her lap, observing. Her squadmates now approached her freely, seeking advice, sharing insight, and including her in camaraderie. The walls that skepticism and doubt had built were gone, replaced by genuine respect. Captain Miles approached, settling beside her silently before speaking. "Emily," he said quietly, "I've seen a lot in my career. Soldiers come and go, skill varies, but you've changed the way this unit operates. Not just through what you do, but how you think. Calm, precise, deliberate. People follow that naturally. You've earned their trust and mine." Emily nodded, allowing herself a quiet acknowledgement. Recognition was not the goal, yet it was grounding. Her actions had spoken, and now they resonated in a way words never could. Later, Emily found a moment alone, gazing at the stars above the mountains. The desert night stretched infinitely, silent except for the occasional rustle of wind through rocks. She reflected on the journey, the ridicule at Fort Benning, the grueling practice, the missions that tested her skill, patience, and morality. Every obstacle had shaped her, every doubt had strengthened her, and every engagement had confirmed her mastery. She had become more than a soldier. She had become a sentinel, an unseen force that ensured the survival of those around her. As she reviewed her rifle, cleaned it meticulously, and prepared for the night, Emily allowed herself a rare moment of contemplation. The weight of responsibility was ever present, but she also recognized her growth. She had learned to balance lethal precision with moral clarity, to act decisively yet thoughtfully, to lead silently through example rather than command. The lessons of the mountains, of Fort Benning, and of the battlefield had crystallized into a philosophy of action that was uniquely her own. Sleep came lightly, but Emily remained aware, her senses attuned to the environment. She understood that mastery did not mean invulnerability. It meant preparedness, vigilance, and disciplined calm. She dreamed not of recognition or accolades, but of precision, focus, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her actions had protected lives, preserved her squad, and transformed doubt into respect. The following morning, the squad prepared to move again. Emily took her position on the ridge, rifle ready, scanning the terrain with her practiced eye. She observed subtle movements, calculated angles, and anticipated enemy positions. Her squad followed her lead without hesitation, trust fully earned and silently maintained. Emily's journey had come full circle from the mocked recruit at Fort Benning to the silent, respected, and lethal force in the mountains of eyes. Before she descended to join her squad, Emily whispered to herself, a mantra that had guided her through training in battle: patience, precision, presence. These were the pillars of her success, the principles that had transformed doubt into respect, mockery into acknowledgement, and training into mastery. She was ready for any challenge, prepared to act decisively, and guided by both skill and moral clarity. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the rugged peaks and deep valleys, Emily Carter moved down the ridge, rifle at the ready, eyes scanning, mind focused. The mountains remained alive with unseen threats, the desert full of shadows, yet she felt a profound calm. She had faced ridicule, skepticism, and death itself, and emerged not just alive, but transformed. The laughter of those who doubted her was long gone, replaced by quiet acknowledgement, trust, and respect earned through action. In the silence of the mountains, Emily understood her place. She was not a soldier for recognition or fame, but a sentinel, precise, patient, and unwavering. Her journey had tested her skill, her judgment, and her conscience, and she had risen to each challenge. The world beyond these peaks might never fully understand the discipline, focus, and resolve that defined her, but those who depended on her did. They knew the truth. Emily Carter was more than a sniper. She was the calm in the storm, the unseen guardian, the silent force that commanded respect through action alone. As she moved with her squad toward the next mission, Emily allowed herself one final reflection. The lessons of Fort Benning, the mountains, and the battlefield were clear. Patience, precision, and presence were everything. And in the quiet of the desert, Emily whispered one last time, a quiet vow to herself and the mountains that had tested her: they will never laugh again.